Hello, welcome. We're going to look at using studio horns to create a piece of music in the style of Saint Motel's My Type. I've basically done a pastiche of that track. We're going to use a motif along with drums, percussion, bass, keys, all of that kind of stuff to create a whole track to see how realistic I can get studio horns to sound. So that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. First, let's take a listen to the track. So first of all, the whole track is built on just two chords, C minor and F major. So basically what we've got is a simple motif that is just following the chords, really. If we look here, you can see that the C and E flat are spelling out the chord of G. Sorry, my apologies. I meant to say C, but in actual fact, it's C minor.
C minor.
And then there's some non-chord tones that fit in between. So such as here, you got an F there, then the F moving up to the chord tone of G as it goes into the next chord, which is F. So let's just take a listen to that on its own. When we then get into the sort of second time round on the motif, the tenor sax and baritone sax then come in. The way I've voiced this is I've gone for trumpet 1, trumpet 2, tenor sax and baritone. I've done them as individual instruments. The reason why I've done that is so that when I'm actually using them in the mixer, I've got more control over them being on separate tracks. I know that I could do it as a multi-instrument, but I didn't want to do that. And the reason why is because the way it's mapped out on the keyboard, there's crossover points between the various different instruments. The main motif is doubled on the trumpet 2 and trumpet 1, and then the tenor sax and the baritone sax are, in terms of voicings, they're kind of doing their own thing. So rather than it be 4 independent voices, really it's actually just 3 independent voices because trumpet 1 and 2 are playing in octaves. Now, to make it more interesting, every now and then I have actually taken trumpet 1 and trumpet 2 move away from each other. Trumpet 1 goes up to the B flat, trumpet 2 is going to an A, so we get a semitone difference between the A and the B flat, but because they're over an octave apart, you can get away with the voicing. But if you notice that the line is going upwards here, whereas here in trumpet 2, we've got a different kind of movement. The other thing that I want you to notice is the chord voicing on the F. Each time it comes in, I've used the different voicing until it resolves on that C minor at the end. What that does is it actually makes the part much more interesting. Different voicing. So what I've got here going from the C minor chord to the F, I'm using A flat augmented. So you get that lovely sound. So we go C minor, and then we go augmented, and then F. So that's one thing that you could try out on your own music. If you want to find an interesting voicing and you want to move from one chord to another chord, you could actually use augmented chords to create chromatic movement. Let's say if I just take a C major chord and then I want to move chromatically to another chord, I could just do a C augmented, and then I could move my G sharp, which is the augmented fifth, I could move that up to an A, and I've now got an A minor. I could do the same thing with the chromatic movement. I could go C major, augmented fifth to the G sharp, and then instead of doing an A minor this time, I could keep the A at the top and then move up to a D minor. The other thing that I'm doing is with the F chords, I'm actually using a number of different color non-chord tones. So I'm using a G to create an F9 and a B flat to create an 11th. So we get, and from time to time, E flat as well, so you get an F7. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I'm not just using C minor and F, I'm actually coloring those chords with different extensions. Sometimes I'm using a 9th, sometimes I'm using a 7th, sometimes I'm using an 11th, or a combination of all of them. Now, when I get into the middle section here, it's just simply stabs. I'm also using the articulations as well, so you can see that we've got different articulations as it's being played. By using those articulations through the various different parts, it gives much more of a live feel. The other thing, of course, that I'm using, which is an essential part, is to actually use modulation. You can see here that if I bring all 4 voices back in, you can see that I've modulated each individual line. And that, again, is going to make the part sound a lot more live, a lot more real, and a lot more natural. If I just open the mixer, the first thing I want to show you is on each of these individual instruments, I've just used just a small amount of EQ on each trumpet. So you've got trumpet 1, trumpet 2, and you can see I'm just cutting the low end and doing a little bit of a dip in the highs. Then in the sax, I'm just boosting the low end a bit just to make it a bit more throaty, a bit more gritty. And then the baritone sax, I just used some upper mids just to bring out some of the sort of harmonics. What I did with the horn section in terms of reverb is this. I wanted to use different reverbs for each instrument. Now, what I want you to notice, if you look at the mix style of each one, I've set the mix style up to be different for each one, much like you would with a send if I was sending it out to a bus. But by having 4 different reverbs is I can set up different reverb times. So trumpet 1 has the longest reverb. That's the one that you hear the most because it's the highest, and you're going to hear that reverb really ringing out and through. For the other trumpet, I've gone for a shorter decay time and I've mixed it down much lower. If you notice, the mix for trumpet 1 is very, very high. It's over 60%, whereas all the other ones I've gone for a very low send mix. In Valhalla, you've got this great feature where you can have different colors, like the color of 1970s reverb, 1980s, and now. Now, with the 1970s reverb, it downsamples and is slightly darker and noisier. It makes it a bit grittier and a bit more raw. Trumpet 2 and the tenor sax, I've gone for the 80s. So no downsampling on this one, but it is still darker and noisier. For the baritone sax, because I don't want to use lots of reverb, what I did was I went for now, because that's much brighter and much cleaner. Okay, so the next thing that I did was I bussed this and I used just a little bit of global EQ, cutting out the lows, just a little dip in the low mids and a little dip at the top. On this second EQ that I've used, I could have done this within one EQ, but I just used a second EQ. What I wanted to really bring out was the room sound from those reverbs. It's not so much about the trumpets. So in stereo, I've really boosted the top end, and by boosting the top end, it brings that room up much more. So we'll do an A/B of this. The very last thing that I used, this is really the only unique plugin that I've used in the whole piece. And this is from Izotope, and it's their plugin called Vinyl. And it allows you to select different decades of what music sounded like going through vinyl. So let's listen to everything with and without the reverb, the EQ, and then the vinyl effect. Okay, so let's hear it with the EQ and the reverbs. Okay, now let's bring in vinyl, and what it will do is it will just degrade the sound slightly. So one of the things to notice about the voicings, the way it's the horn motif is voiced, is good voice leading. So for example, where we have these notes that are coming up and then down, you can see in the second trumpet part, it comes down, up, down. So it's going in an opposite direction. That's one thing that you can think about in your own voicings when you're creating your own parts. Have some of the voices moving in opposite direction. So what you're trying to do is avoid something called parallel motion, where all the notes move. Now that doesn't apply if you've got them moving in octaves. The reason why they're moving in octaves is because they then become one voice. But if you're trying to create harmonies that are not one voice all moving in the same direction, you know, two voices on a melody, what you want to do is have your parts moving in different directions. For example, here on this point here, you can see that the outer voice is coming down while the outer voice, the bass, the lower one, is going in an upwards direction. Again, here, as this starts to go up, you see the baritone then comes back down. So all the time, the outer voices are moving in opposition to each other. It doesn't mean to say that they can't move in parallel motion or that they don't move in the same direction. That would be ridiculous to suggest that. But at times, just try and look at your voicings, how you're creating your voicings so that they move in different directions. Good voice leading is all about looking at those various different aspects. Are they moving towards each other or away from each other, or are they moving in the same direction by the same amount, the same step? If they are, and it doesn't sound right to you, maybe have one voice going in a different direction. And that way you'll get a much more unified and thicker harmonic sound. So that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by hitting the like button. I'd be hugely grateful. And if you found this tutorial helpful, I'd be grateful of your support by subscribing. All you need to do is just hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.